Babysitting was easy money, and I needed it. 17, home alone with 2 kids asleep upstairs. I figured that the night would be smooth sailing. The house was big, too big for just me. But I liked the space. It was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the walls or a gust of wind against the old windows. The TV flickered softly in front of me, my favorite show playing. Everything was calm until the phone rang. I wasn't expecting anyone to call. Glancing at the clock, it was already close to midnight. Weird. I hesitated for a moment, feeling that strange pull in my gut. Who calls this late? I muted the TV and picked up the phone. Hello? Nothing. Just silence. My breath caught in my throat as I listened harder. Sometimes you can hear something even in silence, the slight rustle of breathing, or a shift on the other end. But this was pure, unsettling emptiness. I was about to hang up when I heard it. A whisper. Josh. My name. A quiet, raspy whisper. Like the words were crawling through the phone line. I froze, heart slamming into my chest. I stood up, my body tense and alert. Who is this? I demanded, trying to sound calm, but my voice wavered. The silence stretched longer this time, thicker, before a faint click ended the call. I sat back down, shaken but trying to brush it off. It had to be some prank. Maybe someone got my number. Maybe the kids' parents had some friends with a twisted sense of humor. Yeah, that had to be it. Minutes ticked by, but I couldn't focus on the TV anymore. The quiet of the house seemed louder now. Every creak or groan from the floorboards felt ominous. The wind outside seemed to howl just a bit more than usual. Then the phone rang again. I didn't want to answer it. My hand shook as I picked it up. Josh. The voice was the same, low, raspy, a dry whisper just barely audible. But this time, it didn't stop. The whisper turned into breathing, deep and slow, like they wanted me to hear every breath. Fear prickled at my skin. This wasn't just some prank. Whoever it was knew my name, and they were playing with me. I hung up quickly, hands trembling now, and stood in the middle of the living room. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. The house felt different, the air thicker. I glanced up the stairs where the kids slept. The thought of someone being out there, maybe inside, watching, waiting, made my skin crawl. For the next few minutes I just stood there, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. And when it finally did, my stomach dropped. The sound of the ringing seemed to fill the whole house, too loud, too sharp. I answered almost on autopilot. This time the voice didn't whisper. It was clear, close, too close. I know you're alone. The voice cut through me like a knife. I could feel the blood drain from my face. My throat tightened, and I couldn't breathe. Whoever this was, they knew. I was completely alone in this house. No help, no one around. I slammed the phone down, backing away from it like it was a threat, my pulse racing out of control. I grabbed my phone and texted the kids' parents. Nothing crazy, just asking when they'd be home. No response. I glanced at the time. 12:10 a.m. They were supposed to be back around 1. I locked all the doors, making sure the windows were sealed. I even went upstairs and checked on the kids. They were fine, tucked in, fast asleep. At least they were safe. I went back downstairs, pacing, trying to figure out what to do, call the police. But what would I say? That some stranger called me, whispered my name, and then said they knew I was alone. I'd sound insane. And what if they were outside watching the house? My heart pounded harder at the thought. Then the phone rang again. This time I didn't move. I let it ring. My phone buzzed with a notification, a text from an unknown number. I'm inside. The words on the screen made my blood run cold. I scanned the room, my heart racing out of control. No, no way. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Then I heard it. A creak. Not from the old walls or the settling house, but from the stairs, the faintest groan of wood bending under weight. My blood turned to ice as I turned toward the staircase. Slowly, one step at a time, the sound grew louder. Someone was coming down the stairs. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a lamp, hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs. My breath hitched. The house was dead silent. But I knew, whoever it was, they were standing just out of view, just beyond the wall, waiting. I couldn't move. My body was frozen with fear, locked in place. And then the voice came again, but not through the phone. It came from the stairs. "I see you." My body reacted before my brain did. I bolted toward the front door, yanking it open and running out into the cold night. My feet pounded against the pavement, the wind biting at my face. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until my legs burned, until the house was a distant, dark shape behind me. I didn't stop until I was in the neighbor's yard, frantically banging on their door. When they answered, all I could do was gasp, trying to explain, but the words wouldn't come out right. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty, no sign of anyone. But the phone on the table still had the call logs, the texts from the unknown number, and the faint imprint of footsteps on the stairs. It started out like any other babysitting job. The parents were nice enough, and the kids, a pair of energetic 5-year-old twins, weren't difficult to handle. I had done this 100 times before. Tuck the kids in, watch some TV, and maybe sneak a snack from the kitchen. Easy money. The house was a bit larger than I was used to, a 2-story colonial tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It had that old, well-loved charm, and the furniture looked expensive, antique even. I could tell this family had been here for a while. When the parents were leaving, everything seemed routine. "They'll be asleep by 8, the mom, Mrs. Thompson, said with a tired smile. Her husband, already halfway out the door, checked his watch impatiently. "Oh, and one more thing," she added, her voice lowering, almost as if she didn't want to say it. She glanced toward the living room and pointed toward the far corner. "Don't mind the clown." I followed her gaze and felt my stomach flip. There, standing in the corner, was a life-sized clown statue. Its gaudy red and yellow outfit was faded, the paint chipping off in some spots. The face was the worst part. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, 2 dark pits that seemed to bore into me, and its smile was stretched too wide, almost like it was mocking me. "It's unsettling, I know," she said, her face tight. "But it was my grandmother's, and we're not allowed to move it. Some kind of family superstition." She forced a smile, as if to downplay the weirdness, but I could see the discomfort in her eyes. "Just ignore it." Easier said than done. The evening passed without much incident. The kids were wild for the first hour, but once I got them into bed, the house settled into an eerie calm. I tried watching TV, but every time I glanced at the screen, I could feel the clown's eyes on me, like it was watching, waiting for me to turn away. Eventually, I turned the TV off and grabbed my phone, scrolling aimlessly, trying to shake off the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Every so often, I found myself glancing over at the corner, at that twisted grin and those empty eyes. I told myself it was just a statue. It was harmless. But then, strange things started happening. At first it was small, barely noticeable. A soft creak from upstairs, a shuffle in the hallway. I brushed it off as the house settling, the kind of noises you get in old homes. But then, I heard something else. A faint giggle, like a child's laughter. I froze, listening hard. The kids were fast asleep. I had checked on them twice already. My heart began to race. The sound came again, a soft, mocking chuckle. It was coming from the living room. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat, and stared at the clown. I could have sworn its head had tilted slightly, just a fraction, but enough to send a chill down my spine. Its eyes, they seemed different, more focused. I shook my head, laughing nervously to myself. "You're being ridiculous," I muttered. "It's just a stupid statue." But even as I said it, I felt that gnawing dread deep in my gut. The house was too quiet now, the kind of silence that presses in on you, suffocating. I started hearing things. Footsteps, soft at first, then more deliberate, slow, purposeful. They echoed down the hallway, stopping just short of the living room. I stood up, clutching my phone tightly. The power flickered for a second, and the lights dimmed. My pulse spiked as the house plunged into darkness. I scrambled, trying to find my phone's flashlight app, the screen blindingly bright in the pitch black. I turned the light toward the corner of the room. The clown was gone. My heart stopped. I stood there, frozen, the light trembling in my hand. The corner where the clown had been was empty, just a bare patch of wall. I whipped the flashlight around the room, the beam cutting through the shadows, searching for any sign of it. The footsteps came again, but closer this time, right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just empty space. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but nothing made sense. And then I saw it. The clown. Its face, that horrible painted grin, peeking out from the edge of the hallway, just barely visible in the dim light. It was crouching now, its body twisted in an unnatural position, like it was ready to pounce. I backed away slowly, my legs trembling. I didn't take my eyes off it. I couldn't. The air was thick with tension, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. I fumbled for the front door, my hand slipping on the knob. The footsteps grew louder, closing the distance between us. The clown moved. I bolted, throwing the door open and stumbling into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the street, my lungs burning, my heart slamming against my ribs. When I finally looked back, the house was dark and silent, just like it had been when I arrived. But I knew deep down that something was still watching me from inside, something that wasn't just a statue. I was only supposed to babysit for the summer, a quick way to earn some extra cash before heading back to college. Easy money, or so I thought. When Mrs. Harlow called and asked if I could watch her kids for the evening, I didn't hesitate. She offered double my usual rate, and all I had to do was spend the night in her old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. I had heard rumors about the place. Everyone in town had. They called it the haunted house on the hill. People talked about strange noises, unexplained shadows, and a tragic history that clung to the house like a curse. But I didn't believe in that stuff. Ghosts weren't real. They were just stories to scare kids. At least, that's what I told myself as I pulled up to the house. The house loomed over me, its dark silhouette cutting into the twilight sky. It looked like something out of a nightmare. Tall, narrow, and with windows that seemed to watch you. The moment I stepped out of my car, I felt a chill in the air. Despite it being a warm summer evening, I tried to shake off the unease as I approached the front door, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. Mrs. Harlow greeted me with her usual hurried smile. She barely gave me time to ask any questions before she left, reminding me that the kids, Jake and Emily, would be in bed by 9, and I wouldn't need to do much more than check on them once in a while. Inside the house felt suffocating. Dark wood paneling, heavy furniture draped in sheets, and portraits of grim-looking ancestors lined the walls. The place smelled old, like dust and dampness. It was the kind of house where every creak and groan of the floorboards made you jump. Jake and Emily were unfazed. They showed me around, laughing and playing like any other kids. Their laughter echoed in the halls, a strange contrast to the eerie silence that otherwise filled the place. By the time they were tucked into bed, I was ready to settle down for a quiet evening. I made myself a cup of tea and tried to ignore the heavy feeling that lingered in the air. But as the night wore on, something started to gnaw at me. It began with small things, footsteps above me, even though I knew the kids were asleep. The faint sound of voices, too low to make out, but unmistakably there, whispering in the walls. I tried to brush it off. It was an old house. Old houses made noise. But that feeling of being watched, it wouldn't go away. Every time I turned a corner, I expected to see someone standing there, just out of sight. I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. Around midnight, as I sat in the kitchen, I heard a scream, a child's scream. My heart leaped into my throat. The sound came from upstairs, from the direction of the kids' room. Without thinking, I bolted up the stairs, my pulse hammering in my ears. I flung the door open, expecting to find Jake or Emily in some sort of distress. But the room was empty. Both beds were empty. The sheets were tangled, tossed aside like there had been a struggle. "Jake? Emily?" I called, my voice shaking. No response. Panic set in. I searched the entire house, calling their names, opening every door, checking every closet. But they were gone. There was no trace of them. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling as I fumbled to dial the police. But before I could press call, I heard it. The sound of laughter. Children's laughter. It was faint, but unmistakable. And it was coming from upstairs. I hadn't noticed the attic door before. It was hidden at the far end of the hallway, a heavy wooden door that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The laughter was coming from behind that door. My hand hovered over the brass knob. My body screamed at me to turn and run, to leave the house and never look back. But I couldn't. I had to find them. I had to make sure they were safe. The door creaked open, revealing a steep staircase leading up into the attic. The air grew colder with each step, and the laughter grew louder, more unnatural. It wasn't the light-hearted laughter I'd heard earlier. It was wrong. Twisted. The attic was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Shadows danced across the dusty floor, casting long, eerie shapes. And there, in the center of the room, sat Jake and Emily. They were huddled together, their backs to me, giggling softly. "Jake? Emily?" I called out, my voice cracking. They didn't turn around. I stepped closer. "What are you doing up here? You scared me half to death." Their laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. Slowly they turned to face me, and that's when I saw it. Their eyes. They weren't the same bright, curious eyes I had seen earlier. Their eyes were empty, hollow, dark as the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. Their faces twisted into grotesque smiles, unnatural and chilling. "We're not scared," Emily whispered, her voice distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "You should be." The room seemed to close in around me, the shadows creeping closer. I couldn't move. My body felt frozen, paralyzed by the fear that had taken root deep inside me. I wanted to run, to scream, but all I could do was stand there, staring into those soulless eyes. Suddenly the light flickered out, plunging the attic into darkness. The laughter returned, louder this time, echoing around me, filling the room with a sense of dread I couldn't escape. And then I heard the footsteps behind me.